The morning sun sliced through the towering glass walls of Sentinel Holdings Manhattan headquarters, casting sharp beams across the polished mahogany table in the 42nd floor boardroom. The air was crisp with the scent of leather and ambition, but beneath the sleek veneer of corporate power, a quiet tension simmered. Evelyn Harper sat at the head of the table, her posture regal, her tailored navy blazer a silent declaration of authority. At 38, she was a force, an African-American woman who had clawed her way from Atlanta's working-class neighborhoods to become CEO of a multi-billion-dollar financial empire. Her deep brown eyes, sharp as a ledger's bottom line, scanned the room, missing nothing. Her fingers, adorned with a single silver ring, tapped lightly against a leather-bound notebook, a rhythm that betrayed her mind was already 3 moves. Ahead, the boardroom was a gallery of tailored suits and calculated expressions. 12 directors, mostly men, filled the seats, some young and hungry, others silver-haired and entrenched, their wealth built on decades of financial maneuvering. Charles Bennett, a stout man with a penchant for cufflinks and caution, leaned forward, his voice cutting through the hum of murmured side conversations. "We need to be mindful of the risks," he said, adjusting his tie. "The economic landscape in the South Atlanta, Birmingham, Memphis is, let's say, unpredictable. Loan default rates are climbing. The numbers don't lie." Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. She knew exactly what unpredictable meant, a euphemism for Black and Latino communities, a coded way to dismiss entire regions as unworthy of investment. She'd heard this rhetoric before, back when she was a junior analyst fighting to be heard in rooms like this. Now, as CEO, the same arguments persisted, dressed up in fancier jargon, but no less insidious. "I appreciate your concern, Charles," she said, her voice smooth but edged with steel. "But risk assessment should be based on data, not assumptions. Sentinel Holdings prides itself on financial inclusion. We're not here to reinforce barriers that lock out entire communities from capital." A few heads nodded. Daniel Foster, a younger director with a knack for analytics, among them. But Charles wasn't swayed. "It's about long-term sustainability, Evelyn," he countered, his tone patronizing. "Expanding too aggressively into these markets could hurt our quarterly returns, maybe even spook investors. We can't afford to look reckless." Evelyn's gaze hardened. "Or maybe we can't afford to keep perpetuating a system that decides who's worthy of opportunity based on zip codes or skin color." The room stilled, the weight of her words settling like dust. Some directors shifted uncomfortably, others exchanged glances, but no one dared challenge her directly. Not yet. Evelyn exhaled, forcing her shoulders to relax. She'd learned long ago to pick her battles, but this one was personal. Her eyes drifted to the massive screen at the room's front, displaying a map of the United States. A glowing red dot pulsed over Atlanta, Georgia, her hometown, the city where she'd grown up in a cramped apartment, watching her mother juggle 2 jobs to keep the lights on. Atlanta was where Evelyn had learned what it meant to be underestimated, to be told she didn't belong. It was also where Clara Monroe, her mentor, had shown her a different path. Clara, a black banker in the 1980s, had fought for fair lending practices, only to be sidelined by the same kind of men sitting around this table. Clara's fire had ignited Evelyn's, but so had her warnings. The system doesn't change easily, and it punishes those who try. Evelyn had vowed to prove her wrong, to change the system from the top. But now, staring at the map, a quiet doubt crept in. Am I really making a difference, or am I just playing their game? She pushed the thought aside, her voice cutting through the silence. "Let's stop dancing around the issue," she said, standing to command the room. "We need to know what's happening on the ground, not just in reports filtered through layers of management. That's why I'm going to Atlanta myself." A murmur rippled through the board. Daniel Foster raised an eyebrow, intrigued. You mean unannounced? Exactly, Evelyn confirmed, her tone resolute. No scheduled meetings, no red carpet. I want to see how our branches operate when they think no one important is watching. I'll use a pseudonym, Evelyn Monroe, to keep it discreet. Charles cleared his throat, his displeasure evident. Is that really necessary? We have regional executives for that. Nathan Brooks in Atlanta, for instance, he's been exemplary. Evelyn's smile was tight. That's precisely why I'm going. I need to see for myself. No one challenged her further, but the room's energy shifted. Charles's eyes narrowed, and Evelyn knew he'd find subtler ways to undermine her. Others, like Howard Klein, a longtime ally of Edward Langley, the senior VP, watched her with guarded expressions. She'd made enemies by climbing this high, and they were waiting for her to stumble. As the meeting adjourned, the directors filed out, their hushed conversations trailing behind. Evelyn lingered, her gaze fixed on the Atlanta marker. Clara's voice echoed in her mind. They'll let you in the room, but they'll never let you change it. She clenched a jaw, determined to prove otherwise. Alone, Evelyn opened her laptop, her inbox flooding with the usual earnings reports, investor queries, PR pitches. But one email, buried among the noise, caught her eye. No subject line, no sender name, just a single line of text. Look closer at Prestige Bank, Atlanta. Things aren't what they seem. Her pulse quickened. The message was cryptic, possibly a prank, but something about it felt deliberate. She forwarded it to Thomas Reed, her trusted compliance officer, with a note. Check this. Discreetly. Thomas was one of the few she trusted implicitly, a man who'd seen enough corporate games to know when something was off. Evelyn closed her laptop, her mind racing. She'd built Sentinel Holdings into a powerhouse, but power came with blind spots. Reports could be doctored, managers could lie, and biases could fester beneath polished surfaces. Atlanta wasn't just a trip, it was a reckoning. She thought of Clara, who'd lost her career for speaking out, and her mother, who'd never had a fair shot at a loan to start her dream bakery. This was for them, for every person who'd been told they didn't belong. She grabbed her phone and dialed her assistant. Book me a flight to Atlanta, she said, her voice steady. I leave tonight. The call ended, and Evelyn stood, smoothing her blazer. The boardroom was empty now, its silence a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside her. She'd spent her life breaking barriers, proving she could sit at the head of this table. But sitting wasn't enough. The system she'd inherited was rotten at its core, and if she didn't act, she'd be complicit. The red dot on the map pulsed like a heartbeat, calling her back to where it all began. Atlanta wasn't just a city, it was a test, a chance to honor Clara's fight and rewrite the rules. As she stepped into the elevator, her reflection stared back from the mirrored walls, resolute but shadowed by doubt. She'd built an empire, but empires could fall. The cryptic email lingered in her mind, a warning or a challenge she couldn't ignore. Whatever waited in Atlanta, Evelyn Harper was ready to face it, not as a CEO playing a role, but as a woman who knew the cost of silence. The doors closed, and the elevator descended, carrying her toward a fight that would change everything. The Atlanta sun hung high, its golden glare bouncing off the glass facade of Prestige Bank in Midtown, a sleek monolith that seemed to reflect the world outside while hiding its truths within. Evelyn Harper stepped out of her rental car, the humid air wrapping around her like a heavy shawl. Gone was the tailored navy blazer and silver ring that marked her as Sentinel Holdings CEO. Today, she wore a muted gray dress, simple but structured, paired with low heels and a plain handbag. Her hair, usually pinned in a sharp updo, fell in loose waves, and her face bore only a touch of makeup. She was Evelyn Monroe now, a pseudonym chosen to honor her mentor, Clara, and to slip unnoticed into the bank her company owned. At 38, Evelyn knew how to play a role, but the weight of what she might find pressed against her chest, sharp and insistent. The cryptic email from yesterday. Look closer at Prestige Bank, Atlanta. Things aren't what they seem, echoed in her mind, a puzzle she couldn't yet solve. She'd forwarded it to Thomas Reed, her compliance officer, but answers wouldn't come fast. This visit was her first move, a chance to see the bank's operations without the filter of corporate reports or the polish of prepped executives. Evelyn adjusted her sunglasses, squared her shoulders, and walked toward the entrance, her heels clicking softly on the pavement. Midtown buzzed around her, honking taxis, street vendors, the pulse of a city she'd once called home, but her focus was singular. Prestige Bank was a flagship, a symbol of Sentinel's reach. If something was wrong here, it wasn't just a glitch. It was a betrayal of everything she'd fought to build. Inside, the bank was a study in calculated elegance. Polished marble floors gleamed under recessed lighting, and minimalist furniture exuded wealth without warmth. The air carried a faint scent of leather and paper, undercut by the sterile hum of air conditioning. A short line of customers, mostly white and dressed in tailored suits or designer dresses, moved smoothly through transactions at the marble countertops. Tellers offered practiced smiles, their voices a murmur of pleasantries. Evelyn joined the line, her presence unremarkable at first, just another customer in a sea of routine. She clutched a bank card tied to a personal account under the name Evelyn Monroe, one she'd set up years ago for discreet transactions. No one would connect it to Sentinel's CEO, not yet. When her turn came, she stepped to the counter, facing a young teller with neatly combed blonde hair and a nameplate reading Brandon Hayes. His blue eyes met hers, and for a moment, his polite smile held until it didn't. A flicker of hesitation crossed his face, subtle but unmistakable, as if her presence required a different script. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice controlled but clipped. "How can I help you today?" "I'd like to withdraw $25,000 from my personal account," Evelyn said, sliding her bank card and driver's license across the counter. Both were valid, pristine, tied to an account with ample funds. She kept her tone neutral, her expression calm, but her eyes tracked Brandon's every move. Brandon's fingers paused over the card, his gaze darting to the license. "That's a significant amount," he said, his smile tightening. "May I see a secondary form of identification?" Evelyn's brow lifted slightly. "Secondary ID for a withdrawal?" "For security purposes," Brandon replied, his tone overly rehearsed. "It's standard protocol for high-value transactions." Evelyn glanced at the counter to her left, where a white man in his 50s, clad in a navy suit, had just completed a withdrawal. She'd overheard him request $50,000 double her amount without so much as a second glance from the teller. No extra ID, no delays, just a swift stack of cash and a nod. "Standard, you say?" she asked, her voice still even. "Because the gentleman before me didn't seem to need additional verification." Brandon stiffened, his fingers tightening around her license. "We take fraud prevention seriously, ma'am," he said, a faint edge creeping into his tone. "I'll need to escalate this to the branch manager." "One moment." Without waiting for her response, he turned and disappeared into a back office, her ID and card still in hand. A slow burn of anger ignited in Evelyn's chest, familiar but no less sharp. She'd expected resistance, but this being treated like a potential fraudster in her own bank was a gut punch. She forced her breathing to steady, her eyes scanning the room. The pattern was impossible to miss. At another counter, a young black man requesting a $5,000 withdrawal was being grilled about his source of funds, his frustration palpable as the teller demanded proof of income. Beside him, a white woman deposited a check and left within minutes, her transaction seamless. Across the lobby, a middle-aged black woman stood at the customer service desk, her arms crossed, her voice rising in exasperation. 3 days to clear a check I've deposited here for years? That's ridiculous. Evelyn's gaze locked on the woman, whose nameplate clad opponent called her Mrs. Reynolds. Marcia Reynolds, Evelyn guessed, noting the fire in her eyes and the way she held her ground against the manager's weak excuses. Marcia's salt and pepper curls framed a face lined with experience, and her deep brown eyes flashed with a defiance Evelyn recognized. This wasn't just about one transaction. It was a system, a quiet machine designed to make certain people feel small. The manager, a tall man in a crisp navy suit, emerged from the back office, Brandon trailing behind. His nameplate read Nathan Brooks, and his polished demeanor screamed efficiency, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as they met Evelyn's. "Ms. Monroe," Nathan said, his voice smooth but practiced, "I understand there's a concern with your withdrawal. For transactions of this size, we require managerial approval to ensure security. It's standard protocol." Evelyn tilted her head, her tone cool, "So I've been told. But I'm curious, Mr. Brooks, does this protocol apply to every customer? Or just certain ones?" Nathan's smile didn't waver, but his jaw tightened. "It's applied based on risk assessment, ma'am. Nothing personal." "Nothing personal," Evelyn repeated, letting the words hang. She glanced at Marcia, still locked in her own battle, then back at Nathan. "I'll wait for your approval then. I have time." Nathan nodded, retreating to his office with Brandon, who cast a nervous glance over his shoulder. Evelyn stepped to the waiting area, a row of stiff chairs by the windows, and sat, her hands folded in her lap. The bank's high ceilings and sterile lighting seemed designed to intimidate, to remind customers of their place in its hierarchy. She watched, cataloging every interaction. The white businessman who breezed through a loan inquiry, the Latino couple asked for extra documentation, Marcia's ongoing argument. Each moment was a thread in a tapestry of bias, woven so tightly it was almost invisible, unless you knew where to look. Marcia, finally free from the customer service desk, stormed past, her purse clutched tightly. She caught Evelyn's eye, pausing as if sensing a shared frustration. "They make you jump through hoops too?" Marcia asked, her voice low but sharp. Evelyn nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Something like that. Seems like it's a pattern." Marcia snorted, glancing at the tellers. "Patterns an understatement. I've been banking here 10 years, and it's always the same." "You're Marcia, right?" "I'm Evelyn." Marcia studied her, then nodded. "Nice to meet you, Evelyn. Wish it was better circumstances." She hesitated, then added, "This place needs a shake-up. Someone ought to do something." Evelyn's smile deepened, a spark igniting. "Maybe someone will." As Marcia left, Nathan returned, his expression a mask of professionalism. "Ms. Monroe, your withdrawal has been approved," he said, sliding her card and ID back. "Apologies for the delay." Evelyn took them, her gaze unwavering. "No need to apologize. I got what I came for." She stood, smoothing her dress, and walked out, the weight of her discovery settling like a stone. The bank's glass doors closed behind her, reflecting the Atlanta skyline, but Evelyn saw through the facade. Prestige wasn't just a branch. It was a symptom, a crack in Sentinel's foundation. She pulled out her phone and dialed Thomas. "Start the audit on Prestige Bank," she said, her voice steady. "I want everything transaction data, approval, rates, demographics, and Thomas, keep it quiet." The call ended, and Evelyn glanced back at the bank, Marcia's words echoing. Someone ought to do something. She wasn't just someone, she was the CEO, and this was her fight. But as she stepped into her car, the cryptic email flashed in her mind, a shadow of doubt. Whatever was happening at Prestige, it ran deeper than one branch, and Evelyn was about to dive into the heart of it. The Atlanta skyline shimmered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Evelyn Harper's hotel suite, a constellation of lights against the humid dusk. Inside, the room was a quiet fortress minimalist decor, a sleek desk strewn with papers, and the faint hum of the air conditioner. Evelyn sat at the desk, her gray dress from the day's undercover visit replaced by a crisp white blouse and slacks, her hair pulled back into its usual sharp updo. The bank card bearing the name Evelyn Monroe lay discarded beside her laptop, a reminder of the charade she'd played at Prestige Bank. But the memory of Brandon Hayes' hesitation, Nathan Brooks's evasive smile, and Marsha Reynolds's defiant glare burned brighter, fueling a fire that had been smoldering since she'd left the bank. This wasn't just about one bad experience, it was a system, and Evelyn was determined to dismantle it. The cryptic email from 2 days ago. Look. Closer at Prestige Bank, Atlanta. Things aren't what they seem had been her first clue. A shadow of truth she couldn't ignore. Her visit to the bank had confirmed it. Black and Latino customers, herself included, faced scrutiny that white clients didn't, a pattern woven into the bank's operations like a fault line. Evelyn's fingers hovered over her laptop, her mind replaying the day's events. The $25,000 withdrawal she'd requested had been delayed with demands for extra ID, while a white man breezed through a $50,000 transaction. Marsha's check was held for verification, and a young black man was grilled over his source of funds. These weren't accidents. They were deliberate. And Evelyn needed proof. She opened a secure messaging app and typed a message. To Thomas Reed, her compliance officer and one of the few allies she trusted implicitly. Start pulling data on Prestige Bank, Midtown branch. Transaction approvals, denials, verification rates. Break it down by race, gender, income. I want 6 months' worth. Keep it off the radar. Thomas was a veteran of corporate battles, his sharp mind and dry humor a shield against the industry's cynicism. He'd know how to dig without raising alarms, but Evelyn knew this was no small ask. Uncovering systemic bias meant sifting through thousands of records, a process that could take days, not hours. She hit send, her pulse quickening with the weight of what she'd set in motion. A knock at the door broke her focus. Evelyn glanced at the clock. 7:32 p.m. She wasn't expecting anyone. Cautiously, she approached the door, peering through the peephole. A hotel staff member held a manila envelope, her expression neutral. "Delivery for Miss Harper," the woman said, her voice muffled. Evelyn opened the door, accepted the envelope, and tipped her before locking the door again. The envelope was unmarked, its weight light but ominous. She slid it open, revealing a single sheet of paper with typed text. "You're asking questions that won't end well. Back off. No signature, no return address. Just a threat, stark and cold." Evelyn's jaw tightened. The email had been a warning. This was an escalation. Someone knew she was digging, and they weren't happy. She snapped a photo of the note and sent it to Thomas with a message. Find out who sent this. Quietly, setting the note aside, she returned to her laptop, her resolve hardening. Threats meant she was close to something real, and she wasn't about to stop now. But the note also meant danger, a reminder of Clara Monroe's words. The system punishes those who try. Clara, her mentor, had lost her career for challenging bias in the 1980s. Evelyn wouldn't let that be her fate, or Marsha's, or anyone else's. The next morning, Evelyn returned to Prestige Bank, the glass facade gleaming under a cloudless sky. She wore a different outfit, navy skirt, cream blouse, minimal makeup to maintain her Evelyn Monroe persona without drawing attention. The lobby was as polished as before, its marble floors reflecting the bustle of early transactions. Evelyn's eyes scanned the tellers, landing on a new face, a young man in his late 20s with dark, neatly combed hair and a nameplate reading Michael Ortiz. Unlike Brandon Hayes, whose confidence bordered on arrogance, Michael moved with a quiet tension, his hands fidgeting as he assisted a customer. Evelyn joined his line, her instincts telling her he was different. When her turn came, she slid her bank card across the counter. "I'd like to check my account balance," she said, keeping her request simple to test his response. Michael's brown eyes met hers briefly, a flicker of unease passing through them before he nodded. "Of course, Mom." He typed quickly, his movements precise but cautious. The transaction was smooth, no extra questions, no delays. Evelyn noted his efficiency, but also his glance toward the back office, where Nathan Brooks's silhouette was visible through a glass door dot as Michael handed her a printed balance. Evelyn leaned in slightly, her voice low. "You seem to handle things differently than some of your colleagues." Michael's fingers froze, his eyes darting to hers. "I'm not sure what you mean," he said, but his tone betrayed a crack of nervousness. Evelyn held his gaze, her smile faint but deliberate. "I noticed you didn't ask for extra ID or call a manager. Not everyone here is that straightforward." Michael swallowed, his hands gripping the counter's edge. "I just follow policy," he said, but his voice was too quick, too defensive. Evelyn nodded, stepping back. "Good to know." She left the counter, her mind racing. Michael was no Brandon. He wasn't comfortable with the bank's games. He might be the key to understanding what was happening behind the scenes. Outside, Evelyn's phone buzzed with a call from Thomas. She stepped into a quiet corner of the parking lot, the Atlanta heat pressing against her skin. "What have you got?" she asked, her voice low. Thomas's voice was grim. "Preliminary data from Prestige isn't pretty. Black and Latino customers are flagged for verification 3 times more often than white customers. Loan denials are 40% higher for minorities, even with matching credit scores. It's not random, Evelyn. It's a pattern." Evelyn's stomach tightened. "Who's enforcing it?" "Hard to say yet," Thomas replied. "Nathan Brooks runs the branch, but the data suggests directives from higher up. I'm digging into regional oversight, but it'll take a few days to cross-reference." "And that note you sent? No prints, no trace. Whoever's behind it knows how to cover their tracks." "Keep pushing," Evelyn said, her eyes scanning the bank's facade. "And watch your back." As she hung up, another call came through an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A smooth male voice spoke, its tone polished but edged with intent. "Ms. Harper, this is Victor Crane, VP at Horizon Financial. I hear you're poking around Prestige Bank. Perhaps we could discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement?" Evelyn's grip on the phone tightened. Horizon was a rival bank, known for aggressive tactics. "What kind of arrangement?" she asked, her voice cool. "Let's just say we share an interest in Sentinel's stability," Crane said. "Drop your inquiry, and Horizon could ensure certain market advantages for you. No need to stir up trouble." Evelyn's jaw clenched. This wasn't just a threat. It was corporate espionage, a play to exploit her investigation. "I don't make deals with vultures," she said, hanging up before he could respond. Her heart pounded, but her resolve deepened. Horizon's interest meant the stakes were higher than one branch. Someone powerful was watching, and they were nervous. Back in her hotel, Evelyn paced, her mind mapping the pieces. The data, Michael's unease, Crane's call, the anonymous note, it all pointed to a system bigger than Prestige, with roots in Sentinel's core. She thought of Marcia, her words ringing true. This place needs a shake-up. Evelyn opened her laptop, drafting a message to Thomas. "Focus on Edward Langley, Senior VP. Check his oversight of Prestige." Langley was a titan in Sentinel's old guard, a man whose risk management policies had always raised her suspicions. If anyone was pulling strings, it was him. As night fell, Evelyn stood by the window. Atlanta's lights a reminder of her roots. She'd come here to test the system, but now she was in its crosshairs. Clara's warning echoed. The system punishes those who try. But Evelyn wasn't Clara, and she wasn't alone. Michael Ortiz was a crack in the facade, and Marcia Reynolds was a voice waiting to be heard. The fight was just beginning, and Evelyn Harper was ready to wage it. The Atlanta night pressed against the windows of a dimly lit coffee shop, its neon sign flickering in the humid air. Inside, Evelyn Harper sat at a corner booth, the scent of roasted beans mingling with the faint tang of her untouched latte. Her navy blazer was folded neatly beside her, her white blouse crisp despite the long day. At 38, Evelyn had mastered the art of composure, but her deep brown eyes betrayed a storm brewing within. 3 days had passed since her undercover visit to Prestige Bank, and the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place too quickly, too dangerously. The cryptic note delivered to her hotel room. "You're asking questions that won't end well." Back off had been a warning, followed by Victor Crane's veiled offer from Horizon Financial to drop her inquiry. Someone powerful was watching, and Evelyn knew she was treading on thin ice. Her laptop screen glowed with Thomas Reed's latest report, a preliminary audit of Prestige Bank's transactions. The numbers were damning. Black and Latino customers faced triple the verification rate of white clients, with loan denials 40% higher despite equal credit scores. The patent pointed beyond branch manager Nathan Brooks to someone higher, Edward Langley, Sentinel Holdings Senior VP, whose risk management policies had long raised Evelyn's suspicions. But numbers alone weren't enough. She needed hard evidence, something to prove intent, not just outcome. That's why she was here, waiting for Michael Ortiz, the prestige teller whose unease had caught her attention. If anyone could crack the bank's facade, it was him. The bell above the door jingled, and Michael slipped inside, his dark hair slightly disheveled, his eyes scanning the room. At 28, he carried the weight of someone older, his shoulders hunched. Under a gray hoodie, he spotted Evelyn and slid into the booth, his hands fidgeting on the table. "I shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low, barely audible over the hum of the espresso machine. "If they find out I talked to you—" "They won't," Evelyn said, her tone firm but warm. "You're doing the right thing, Michael. I saw how you handled Marcia Reynolds' transaction. No delays, no extra hoops. You're not like Brandon Hayes. You don't believe in their game." Michael's jaw tightened, his fingers tracing a scratch on the table. "It's not about believing," he said. "It's about surviving. I've got a brother, Diego, with medical bills piling up. I can't afford to lose this job." Evelyn's chest ached. She knew that kind of pressure, the kind that forced good people to compromise. Her mother had faced it, working double shifts to keep their Atlanta apartment. "I understand," she said softly, "but staying silent won't fix this. You saw what they did to Marcia, to me, to others. It's not just policy, it's wrong." Michael exhaled, his eyes darting to the window. "You don't know how deep it goes," he said. "They don't write it down, not directly, but there's a system. Brandon, Nathan, they're not acting alone." Evelyn leaned forward, her voice steady. "Tell me." Michael hesitated, then reached into his backpack, pulling out a thin stack of papers, their edges creased from handling. "These are internal memos," he said, sliding them across the table. "Not the official ones. Those are clean. These are from Nathan's office, passed around quietly. They don't say target black customers, but they talk about high risk profiles and enhanced scrutiny. It's code, but everyone knows what it means." Evelyn scanned the memos, her pulse quickening. One, dated 3 months ago, instructed tellers to prioritize verification for certain demographics to mitigate fraud risk. Another mentioned guidance from regional oversight to flag large withdrawals by non-traditional clients. The language was vague, but the intent was clear. Regional oversight, she murmured. That's Langley's domain. Michael nodded, his voice dropping. Nathan gets calls from someone up the chain. I've heard him mention Langley's name, but nothing concrete. They're careful. Evelyn tucked the memos into her bag, her mind racing. This was the break she needed. A paper trail, however. Faint, linking Nathan to Langley. But Michael's fear was palpable, and she knew the risk he was taking. You're brave for this, she said. I'll protect you, Michael. Whatever happens, you won't lose your job. He gave a bitter laugh. You can't promise that. If Nathan finds out, or worse, Langley. He trailed off, his hands clenching. Diego's got cystic fibrosis. I'm all he's got. Evelyn's resolve hardened. She thought of Clara Monroe, her mentor, who'd lost everything for speaking out. She wouldn't let Michael suffer the same fate. I'll make sure Diego's taken care of, she said. But I need you to keep your eyes open. Anything else, emails, calls, anything that ties this to Langley. Michael nodded, but his eyes were haunted. I'll try. Just be careful. They're watching you. As he left, Evelyn sat back, the memos burning a hole in her bag. She dialed Thomas, her voice urgent. I've got memos from Prestige Unofficial, but they point to Langley. Cross-reference them with his communications. And Michael Ortiz is our inside man. Protect his identity. Thomas's voice was grim. Got it. But Evelyn, I'm picking up chatter. Horizon Financial's been sniffing around our stock, shorting us. Crane's not just offering deals. He's playing dirty. Evelyn's jaw clenched. Victor Crane's call had been a warning shot, but this was war. Horizon was exploiting her investigation to destabilize Sentinel, a classic corporate power. Play. Keep tabs on their moves, she said. And get me those Langley records. Hanging up, Evelyn glanced at the coffee shop's TV, where a local news segment caught her eye. Marcia Reynolds stood outside Prestige Bank, her salt and pepper, curls unmistakable, speaking to a small crowd. This bank's been fleecing us for years, she declared, her voice carrying through the screen. Delayed checks, denied loans. It's not a coincidence. It's discrimination, plain and simple. The crowd murmured agreement, holding signs. Fair banking now. Evelyn's lips curved into a faint smile. Marcia wasn't just a customer, she was a spark, igniting a movement. Back at her hotel, Evelyn spread the memos on her desk, her mind mapping the connections. Nathan was the enforcer, Langley the architect, but the system was bigger, embedded in Sentinel's bones. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You're digging in the wrong places. Stop before it's too late. Her heart skipped, but she saved the message, forwarding it to Thomas. The threats were escalating, and she knew why. She was getting close. A memory surfaced. Clara Monroe, sitting across from a younger Evelyn, her eyes weary but fierce. The system's not broken, Clara had said. It's built this way. If you fight it, you'll lose more than you think. Evelyn had vowed to prove her wrong, to change the system from within. Now, as CEO, she was testing that vow, and the cost was mounting. She thought of Michael, risking his job for his brother. Marcia, rallying strangers for justice. Her mother, denied a loan that could have changed their lives. This wasn't just her fight, it was theirs. Evelyn opened her laptop, drafting a secure email to Thomas. Focus on Langley's emails, especially anything tied to risk profiles, and check Horizon's trades. Crane's playing a bigger game. She hit send, then stood by the window. Atlanta's lights a reminder of her roots. The city had shaped her, hardened her, but it had also taught her to fight. Michael's memos were a start, but she needed more proof that would shake Sentinel to its core. As the night deepened, Evelyn knew she was no longer just a CEO. She was a disruptor, and the system was about to feel her weight. The Atlanta skyline glittered beyond the tinted windows of the private dining room, a constellation of ambition against the sultry night. Evelyn Harper sat at a polished oak table in one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, the air heavy, with the scent of truffle oil and aged whiskey. Her tailored black dress hugged her frame, a stark contrast to the casual guise of Evelyn Monroe she'd worn at Prestige Bank. At 38, she carried the weight of her role as Sentinel Holdings CEO with a grace that masked the storm within. The memo's Michael Ortiz had risked everything to share, burned in her memory-coded directives to target minority customers, linked to Nathan Brooks and pointing toward Edward Langley, Sentinel's senior VP. But tonight wasn't about evidence. It was about power, and the man across the table wielded it like a blade. Edward Langley leaned back in his chair, his silver hair catching the chandelier's glow, his sharp blue eyes studying Evelyn with a mix of amusement and calculation. At 58, he was a titan of the old guard. His risk management policies, the backbone of Sentinel's profits, and, Evelyn now knew, its biases. The private dinner, arranged under the pretense of strategic alignment, was no coincidence. Langley had requested it hours after Evelyn received another anonymous threat. A text reading, "You can't win. Walk away." Her pulse had raced, but she'd come anyway, determined to face the man behind the system she was unraveling. "You've been busy, Evelyn," Langley said, his voice smooth as the bourbon in his glass, stirring up quite a hornet's nest. "In Atlanta. I hear you've got our compliance team digging through Prestige Bank's records." Evelyn's fingers tightened around her water glass, her expression unreadable. "I'm doing my job, Edward. Ensuring our branches operate with integrity." Langley chuckled, a low sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Integrity's a noble word, but it doesn't pay the bills. You're a smart woman. You know the game. Sentinel's success depends on stability, not idealism." Evelyn's jaw clenched, but she kept her tone even. Stability built on denying people their own money? On rejecting loans for qualified applicants because of their skin color? That's not a game I play. Langley's smile faded, replaced by a steely glint. He set his glass down, leaning forward. "Let's cut the posturing," he said. "You've seen the memos, haven't you? You think you've got me cornered, but you're missing the bigger picture." He paused, his voice dropping. "Join me, Evelyn. My faction runs this company, quietly, effectively. We can secure your legacy, make you untouchable. Bury this little investigation, and you'll have a seat at the real table." The offer hung in the air, a gilded trap. Evelyn's heart pounded, her mind flashing to Clara Monroe, her mentor, who'd warned her about deals like this. Clara had been a black banker in the 1980s, fighting for fair lending until the system crushed her, forcing her into obscurity. Evelyn saw her now in a memory from 2 decades ago, sitting across a diner table, her eyes weary. "They'll tempt you with power," Clara had said. "Promise you the world if you compromise." "Don't do it, Evelyn. It's a lie." Clara's career had ended for refusing such an offer, her name erased from the industry's history. Now, Evelyn faced the same choice, and the weight of it pressed against her chest. "Why me?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil. "If your system's so effective, why bother with me?" Langley's smile returned, colder now. "Because you're dangerous, Evelyn. You're not just a CEO, you're a symbol. People listen to you. If you push this, you'll destabilize Sentinel, maybe the whole industry. But if you join us, you can shape the future. Think about it. More influence, more wealth, a chance to change things from within. Isn't that what you want?" Evelyn's throat tightened. She'd spent her life proving she belonged, building an empire from Atlanta's margins to Manhattan's boardrooms. Langley's offer was tempting, Not for the wealth, but for the promise of security, a way to protect her legacy without risking everything. She thought of her mother, denied a loan that could have launched her bakery. Of Marcia Reynolds, fighting for her check at Prestige. Of Michael Ortiz, risking his job for his brother's medical bills. Could she really change the system from within, or was that a delusion? She set her glass down, her eyes locking on Langley's. And if I say no? Langley's expression hardened. Then you're making enemies you can't afford. This isn't just about me, Evelyn. There are people, powerful people, who won't let you tear down what we've built. Walk away, or lose more than your title. The threat was clear, echoing the anonymous messages. Evelyn's mind raced, piecing together the stakes. Langley wasn't acting alone. His faction included men like Charles Bennett and Howard Klein, board members who'd resisted her push for inclusion. Then Victor Crane's moves at Horizon Financial, shorting Sentinel stock, suggested external players betting on her failure. This was a war on multiple fronts, and she was in the crosshairs. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas Reed. Marcia Reynolds on local news again. Rally outside Prestige tomorrow. It's getting big. Evelyn's lips curved faintly. Marcia wasn't waiting for permission. She was building a movement, giving voice to the silenced. The thought steadied her, a reminder of why she'd started this fight. I'll consider your offer, Evelyn said, standing and smoothing her dress. But don't hold your breath. Langley's eyes narrowed, but he didn't press. Don't take too long, he said, his voice low. Time's not on your side. Evelyn left the restaurant, the Atlanta heat a sharp contrast to the chilled dining room. In her car, she exhaled, her hands trembling. Langley's offer had shaken her. More than she'd admit. Not because she wanted it, but because it exposed her fear. What if she failed? What if she lost everything, like Clara? She drove to her hotel, the city's lights blurring past, and replayed Clara's warning. It's a lie. Langley's promise was a mirage, a way to keep the system intact while silencing her dot at the hotel. Evelyn turned on the TV, catching a news segment. Marcia stood outside Prestige Bank, her voice fierce. We're tired of being treated like second-class citizens, she declared, flanked by a growing crowd with signs demanding equal banking rights. A reporter noted that Marcia had organized a coalition of affected customers, their stories flooding social media. Evelyn's chest warmed. Marcia was no longer alone, and neither was she. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Thomas. Got something, he said, his voice tense. Langley's emails mention enhanced risk protocols for Prestige, pushed through 2 years ago. No direct orders to discriminate, but the timing matches the data spikes. And Horizon shorting our stock, hard Crane's betting will crash. Evelyn's jaw clenched. Keep digging into Langley. And get me a meeting with Marcia Reynolds. She's not just a customer, she's a partner. As she hung up, another text arrived from an unknown number. You were warned. Attached was a grainy photo of her leaving the coffee shop with Michael, his face circled in red. Her blood ran cold. Someone was tracking her, and Michael was now a target. She forwarded the message to Thomas, her resolve hardening. Langley's offer had been a test, and she'd passed it. But the fight was escalating, and the cost was rising. Evelyn stood by her window, Atlanta's skyline a reminder of her roots. She thought of Clara, whose sacrifice had paved her path. Of Michael, risking everything for justice. Of Marcia, turning pain into power. Langley thought he could buy her silence, but he'd underestimated her. This wasn't just about Sentinel. It was about rewriting a system that had broken too many. As the night deepened, Evelyn knew the road ahead was treacherous, but she was ready to walk it, no matter the cost. The Manhattan skyline loomed beyond the glass walls of Sentinel Holdings Boardroom, a jagged silhouette against a steel gray dawn. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation, the polished mahogany table reflecting the faces of 12 directors. Their tailored suits and guarded expressions, a facade for the battle about to unfold. Evelyn Harper stood at the room's head, her navy blazer sharp, her deep brown eyes burning with resolve. At 38, she was no stranger to high-stakes fights. But today was different. Today, she wasn't just Sentinel's CEO, she was a disruptor, armed with evidence that could topple a titan. Edward Langley, the silver-haired senior VP, sat across from her, his calm demeanor a mask for the storm she was about to unleash. 5 days had passed since Langley's offer in Atlanta, a hot, gilded trap to join his faction and bury her investigation into Prestige Bank's systemic bias. Evelyn had rejected it, her resolve fueled by Marcia Reynolds' growing grassroots campaign, Michael Ortiz's risky memos, and Thomas Reed's damning audit data. Black and Latino customers faced triple the verification rates and 40% higher loan denials than white clients. The memos, coded but clear, linked branch manager Nathan Brooks to Langley's risk protocols. A grainy photo of her meeting Michael, sent with a threat to stop, had only hardened her resolve. Now, in this boardroom, she held the power to expose Langley's system or lose everything trying. Evelyn cleared her throat, her voice cutting through the murmurs. I've called this emergency meeting because Sentinel Holdings has a problem. A systemic one that threatens our integrity and our future. She clicked the remote, and the screen behind her lit up with charts from Thomas's audit. The numbers stark. Verification disparities, loan rejection rates, all broken down by race. The room stilled, directors shifting in their seats. For years, branches like Prestige Bank in Atlanta have enforced policies that unfairly target minority customers. This isn't a glitch, it's deliberate, and it starts at the top. Howard Klein, a Langley loyalist with a perpetually sour expression, leaned forward, his voice sharp. That's a bold accusation, Evelyn. You're implying misconduct without proof. This could tank our stock if it leaks. Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. I have proof. She slid a stack of papers across the table Michael's memos. There. Language veiled but damning. These are internal directives from Prestige Bank, instructing tellers to flag high-risk profiles for extra scrutiny. The result? Black and Latino customers delayed, denied, dismissed, and they trace back to Edward Langley's oversight. Langley's smile was thin, his blue eyes cold. Careful, Evelyn, he said, his tone deceptively mild. Those memos are standard risk management. You're twisting routine policy into something sinister. Evelyn held his gaze, her voice steady. Routine policy doesn't explain why qualified minority applicants are rejected at triple the rate of white ones, or why customers like Marcia Reynolds wait days for checks to clear while others walk out in minutes. She clicked the remote. Again, displaying an email from Langley's office, dated 2 years ago, urging enhanced scrutiny for non-traditional clients. This isn't routine, Edward. It's discrimination, and you designed it. The room erupted in murmurs. Daniel Foster, a younger director, looked stunned, while Catherine Wells, a diversity advocate, nodded grimly. Howard Klein slammed a fist on the table. This is reckless, Evelyn. You're dragging Sentinel through the mud for what headlines? Investors will crucify us. Investors will crucify us if we ignore this, Evelyn shot back. We're a multi-billion-dollar firm. If our profits rely on exploiting customers, we're already failing. Langley leaned back, his fingers steepled. You're out of your depth, Evelyn. Risk assessment is complex. You can't boil it down to a few emails and charts. Then let's simplify it, Evelyn said, her voice like steel. She pressed play on a small speaker, and Nathan Brooks's voice filled the room. Recorded by Michael, during a late-night shift. Langley's office wants us to tighten verification on certain customers, Nathan said. His tone clipped. You know the ones keep it quiet but flag their transactions. A second voice Michaels asked, and if they complain? Nathan's reply was cold. They won't win. Just follow the protocol. The recording stopped and the silence was deafening. Langley's composure cracked, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Catherine Wells spoke first, her voice firm. That's not risk management, Edward. That's targeting. Howard Klein scoffed, but his bravado faltered. 1. Recording doesn't prove a conspiracy. Nathan could be acting alone. He's not, Evelyn said, sliding another document forward, a second recording transcript, this time of Nathan referencing Langley's directives during a regional call. Michael Ortiz, a prestige teller, risked his job to get this. He's not the only one who sees what's happening. Customers like Marsha Reynolds are organizing, speaking out. This isn't just internal, it's public now. Malcolm Turner, a newer board member who'd risen from humble roots like Evelyn, leaned forward. If this is true, we're facing lawsuits, regulators, maybe worse. We need to act. Langley's voice cut through, sharp now. You're buying into her narrative, Malcolm. Evelyn's trying to play hero, but she's risking everything. Our stock, our clients, our reputation. I move for a vote of no confidence in her as CEO, effective immediately. The room gasped. Howard Klein seconded the motion, his eyes gleaming. All in favor, he said, raising his hand. 3 others followed Langley's old guard, men who'd thrived under his system. Evelyn's heart pounded, but she stood, tall, her eyes scanning the room. This was the fight she'd expected, the system's last stand. Catherine Wells shook her head. You're deflecting, Edward. This isn't about Evelyn, it's about what you've done. She kept her hand down, joined by Malcolm and Daniel. The vote was split, 6-6, a deadlock that hung like a guillotine. Evelyn seized the moment, her voice rising. Before you vote, consider this. I've sent this evidence to our legal team and select journalists. If you ask me, it goes public tomorrow. The world will know Sentinel profited by targeting its own customers. Is that the legacy you want? Howard's face reddened. You're bluffing. You wouldn't torch the company you built. Try me, Evelyn said, her gaze unwavering. She clicked the remote, revealing a final slide. A leaked memo from Horizon. Financial, Victor Crane's rival firm, detailing plans to short Sentinel's stock and exploit the scandal. Horizon's betting on our collapse, she said. They've been funding attacks on us, waiting for us to implode. If we don't face this now, they win. The room shifted. Daniel Foster, who'd been silent, spoke up. She's right. Burying this won't save us, it'll destroy us. I'm with Evelyn. One by one, hands lowered. A second vote was called. And this time, only Howard and 1 other supported Langley. The motion failed. Evelyn exhaled, her knees weak but her resolve unbroken. Edward Langley is suspended pending a full investigation, she said, her voice steady. This board will review every policy he's touched. Langley stood, his face a mask of fury. You think you've won? He hissed, his voice low. This isn't over, Evelyn. You've made enemies you can't outrun. He stormed out, the door slamming behind him. The directors dispersed, some shaken, others whispering. Catherine approached Evelyn, her voice soft. You did the right thing. But he's not wrong, this won't be easy. Evelyn nodded, her eyes on the skyline. I know. Alone, she gathered her papers. The weight of the victory, bittersweet. Marsha's rally, Michael's courage, Thomas's data, they'd given her the tools to fight. But Langley's threat echoed, and the smear campaign had already begun. That morning, a tabloid had published a story about her Atlanta youth, painting her as reckless, She knew Langley's allies were behind it, a warning of what was to come. Evelyn's phone buzzed Thomas. "Langley's allies are circling," he said, "and Horizon's shorting is spiking. Brace yourself." She hung up, her mind racing. The boardroom was a battlefield, and she'd won this round. But the war was far from over, and the system wouldn't fall quietly. As dawn broke, Evelyn Harper stood ready, a warrior in a fight she couldn't afford to lose. The Manhattan morning was a gray blur beyond the glass walls of Evelyn Harper's corner office, the city skyline shrouded in mist. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of fresh coffee and the weight of a war still raging. Evelyn stood. By her desk, her tailored charcoal suit a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around her. At 38, she'd faced battles before, but none like this. The Boardroom Showdown 2 days ago had been a victory. Edward Langley, Sentinel Holdings Senior VP, was suspended, his system of discriminatory risk protocols exposed by Michael Ortiz's memos, Nathan Brooks's recorded confession, and Thomas Reed's audit data. But victory came at a cost, and the fallout was crashing down like a tidal wave. Evelyn's phone buzzed incessantly, each notification a new wound. Sentinel stock had plummeted 12% overnight, spooked investors pulling millions as headlines. Screamed, Sentinel Holdings in turmoil. CEO's crusade sparks chaos. A major client, a hedge fund with deep ties to Langley's allies, had withdrawn $200 million, citing leadership instability. And then there was the smear campaign. Venomous assault that had begun the moment she'd left the boardroom. A tabloid, the Financial Pulse, had published a hit piece, Evelyn Harper's Reckless Past, from Atlanta streets to corporate recklessness. The article twisted her youth growing up in a working-class Atlanta neighborhood, her mother's struggles into a narrative of instability, painting her as unfit to lead. Evelyn knew Langley's allies, men like Howard Klein, were behind it, their fingerprints invisible but unmistakable. She tossed the tablet onto her desk, the article's garish headline glaring up at her. Her hands trembled, not from fear but from fury. She'd spent her life proving she belonged, shattering barriers to become Sentinel CEO, only to be reduced to a caricature. A memory surfaced, Clara Monroe, her mentor, warning her in a dimly lit Atlanta diner. "They'll tear you down if you threaten their world. They'll use your past, your skin, anything to make you small." Clara had lost her career for fighting bias in the 1980s. Evelyn refused to let them win, but the personal toll was mounting. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. Thomas Reed stepped in, his usual dry humor replaced by a grim expression. He carried a stack of reports, his tie slightly askew. "It's worse than we thought," he said, setting the papers down. "Horizon Financial's shorting our stock like vultures. Victor Crane's betting will crash and burn. And I've got intel someone's leaking internal emails to the press, framing you as the problem. Langley's allies are orchestrating it." Evelyn's jaw clenched. Crane's call in Atlanta, offering a mutually beneficial arrangement to drop her inquiry, had been a prelude to this. Horizon was exploiting the chaos, a corporate predator circling a wounded giant. "What about Langley?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm. "Quiet for now," Thomas said, "but Howard Klein's rallying the board for another vote. They're claiming your reckless leadership is tanking the company. And that smear piece, it's gaining traction. Social media's eating it up." Evelyn exhaled, her eyes drifting to a framed photo on her desk, her mother, smiling at a church picnic, her strength a silent anchor. She thought of Marcia Reynolds, whose rally outside Prestige Bank was now national news. Marcia's voice, fierce and unyielding, had galvanized a movement, with customers sharing stories of delayed checks, denied loans, and humiliating scrutiny. The hashtag fair banking now trended, and protests had spread to other Sentinel branches. Marcia wasn't just a spark, she was a wildfire, and Evelyn needed her more than ever. "I'm meeting Marcia today," Evelyn said, grabbing her coat. "She's not just fighting for herself, she's giving us a chance to rebuild trust. Keep digging into those leaks. And Thomas? Find out how deep Horizon's involved." Thomas nodded, but his eyes held concern. "Be careful, Evelyn. They're not just coming for your job, they're coming for you." She left the office, the elevator's hum a brief reprieve before stepping into the fray. Outside, the Manhattan air was crisp, but the city's pulse felt hostile. Reporters lurking near Sentinel's headquarters. Evelyn slipped into a waiting car, her driver navigating through traffic toward a community center in Brooklyn where Marcia had asked to meet. The drive gave her time to think, to brace for the storm. The smear campaign wasn't just about her reputation. It was a warning, echoing the anonymous threats. Back off. Stop before it's too late. The grainy photo of her with Michael Ortiz, his face circled in red, haunted her. Michael was at risk, his brother Diego's medical bills a leverage point for Langley's allies. She'd promised to protect him, but the net was tightening. At the community center, a modest brick building with peeling paint, Evelyn found Marcia in a crowded room, surrounded by a dozen people, black, Latino, working class, their faces a mix of anger and hope. Marcia, her salt and pepper curls framing a resolute expression, spotted Evelyn and waved her over. "You made it," she said, her voice warm but urgent. "These folks have stories you need to hear." Evelyn listened as they spoke. A nurse. Denied a mortgage despite stellar credit. A mechanic whose check was held for verification until he missed a rent payment. A teacher humiliated by extra ID demands for a $2,000 withdrawal. Their voices, raw and unfiltered, echoed Evelyn's own experience at Prestige and her mother's struggles decades ago. "This isn't just about money," Marcia said, her eyes fierce. "It's about dignity. We're organizing rallies, petitions, media. But we need you, Evelyn. You're the one who can change this from the top." Evelyn's throat tightened. "I'm trying," she said. "But it's costing us. The company's bleeding, and they're coming for me." Marcia's hand rested on her arm. "They always come for the ones who fight. But you're not alone. We're with you." The words steadied Evelyn, a lifeline in the chaos. She shared her plan. New policies, independent audits, a public apology. The group nodded, their trust fragile but real. As she left, Marcia handed her a flyer for the next rally, her smile a challenge. "Don't let them break you," she said. Back at Sentinel, Evelyn faced a new blow. Thomas greeted her with a grim update. A second hit piece, this time in a major outlet, the Wall Street Chronicle, claiming she'd fabricated the audit data to push a diversity agenda. The article quoted an anonymous senior executive, Howard Klein, no doubt, and hinted at her unstable leadership. Social media erupted, with trolls amplifying the lies. Evelyn's chest ached, the personal attacks cutting deeper than she'd expected. She thought of Clara Monroe, erased for her defiance, and wondered if she was next. Her phone buzzed Thomas again. "Got something," he said. "Horizon's funding the leaks. I trace payments to a PR firm pushing the smear campaign. And there's more. Langley's allies are meeting with major shareholders, pitching a takeover if you're ousted." Evelyn's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a smear. It was a coup, with Horizon pulling strings to destabilize Sentinel. "Get me proof," she said. "And Thomas? I need Michael Ortiz safe. They're targeting him." That night, Evelyn stood in her office, the city's lights a distant hum. She opened her laptop, reviewing Thomas's latest findings. Emails linking Horizon to the PR firm, shareholder meetings tied to Klein. The evidence was mounting, but so was the pressure. A new text arrived. Unknown number. You're out of time. Attached was a photo of her leaving the community center, Marcia's flyer visible in her hand. Her heart raced, but she saved it, forwarding it to Thomas. They were watching, closing in, but she wouldn't break. Evelyn thought of Marcia's rally, Michael's courage, her mother's resilience. The storm was here, but she was still standing. Langley's system was crumbling, and she'd fight to see it fall, no matter the cost. As the city slept, Evelyn Harper prepared for the next battle, knowing the war was far from won. The early summer light filtered through the windows of Sentinel Holdings Manhattan headquarters, casting a warm glow across the sleek conference room. Evelyn Harper stood at the head of a long glass table, her tailored navy suit a symbol of resilience after months of battle. At 38, she'd weathered a storm that would have broken most. A boardroom showdown exposing Edward Langley's discriminatory system, a brutal smear campaign, and Horizon Financial's predatory attacks on Sentinels stock. Now, with Langley ousted and his allies sidelined, Evelyn was rewriting the rules of an industry built on exclusion. Her deep brown eyes, once shadowed by doubt, shone with purpose as she addressed a new team, an independent oversight committee tasked with ensuring Sentinel's reforms took root. 3 weeks had passed since the board voted to suspend Langley, a victory that had cost Evelyn dearly. Sentinel's stock had dipped 15%, major clients had fled, and tabloids had twisted her Atlanta roots into lies of recklessness. But Marcia Reynolds' grassroots movement rallies, petitions, and the viral hashtag #FairBankingNow campaign had turned the tide, giving voice to customers like the nurse denied a mortgage, the mechanic delayed on rent, and the teacher humiliated. At Prestige Bank, their stories, amplified by media, had forced Sentinel to act or crumble. Evelyn had chosen action, and today marked the first step toward redemption. She clicked the remote, ejecting a policy document onto the screen. "This is Sentinel Holdings' new transaction framework," she said, her voice steady but commanding. "Every loan approval, withdrawal verification, and flag transaction will be audited by this committee. No more loopholes, no more unwritten rules. Transparency is our standard now." Catherine Walsh, a former regulator with a reputation for fairness, nodded from the table. "It's ambitious," she said, "but feasible. We'll start with Prestige Bank's Atlanta branch, then roll out to all locations. How do you handle pushback from staff?" Evelyn's lips curved faintly. "We're retraining every employee, from tellers to executives. Those who resist can find work elsewhere." Sentinel's done with complicity. The room murmured approval, but Evelyn knew the road was long. Reforming a multi-billion-dollar firm wasn't just policy, it was culture, and culture fought change. She thought of Michael Ortiz, the prestige teller who'd risked his job to expose Langley's memos. His courage had been a turning point, and Evelyn had vowed to protect him. Today, she'd do more than that. After the meeting, Evelyn flew to Atlanta, the city's humid embrace, a reminder of her roots. Prestige Bank's Midtown branch, once a symbol of bias, was undergoing a transformation. New signage promised equal service for all, and tellers wore badges pledging transparency. Evelyn stepped inside, her heels clicking on the marble floor, and spotted Michael at the counter, his dark hair neat, his posture less tense than before. He saw her and paused, surprise flickering in his brown eyes. "Miss Harper," he said, stepping forward. "I didn't know you were coming. Call me Evelyn," she said, her smile warm. "I'm here for you, Michael. Walk with me." They moved to a small office, the glass walls now adorned with customer feedback forms, a nod to accountability. Evelyn sat across from him, her voice direct. "You risked everything, your job, your brother Diego's care to get us those memos. You're the reason we're changing this bank. I'm promoting you to assistant branch manager." Michael blinked, his hands tightening on the chair arms. "Me? I'm just a teller." You're more than that, Evelyn said. You saw wrong and acted. That's leadership. And I'm not done. You're getting a scholarship for business school, funded by Sentinel. I want you shaping our future. Michael's throat bobbed, his eyes glistening. You don't know what this means. Diago's treatments, my family, we've been scraping by. But Nathan Brooks, he's still here. What if he's gone? Evelyn interrupted. Fired this morning. This branch is yours to help rebuild. You in? Michael nodded, a spark igniting. I'm in. As they left the office, Evelyn felt a weight lift. Clara Monroe, her mentor, had taught her that change started with people like her. Now, mentoring Michael, she was passing that torch, ensuring. Clara's fight lived on. That evening, Evelyn attended a community event at the Brooklyn Community Center, where Marcia Reynolds had first rallied her. The room buzzed with energy families, activists, local business owners, all gathered to launch the Equity Fund, a new initiative to provide microloans to minority entrepreneurs. Marcia, her salt and pepper curls glowing under the light, took the stage, her voice fierce. This fund, she said, is for every person denied a chance because of who they are. It's because of Evelyn Harper that we're here, turning pain into progress. The crowd cheered, and Evelyn, seated in the front, felt their eyes on her. Marcia gestured for her to join, and she did, the applause a humbling wave. I'm no hero, Evelyn said, her voice steady. You are the ones who spoke out, who demanded better. This fund is a start, but we're not stopping until every bank, every boardroom plays fair. Afterward, Marcia pulled her aside, her smile warm but pointed. You kept your word, she said. But they're still out there, people like Langley. You ready for the long haul? Evelyn nodded, thinking of the threats, the photos, the smears. As long as you are. Back in Washington, Evelyn's influence was rippling outward. A week later, she sat in a White House meeting room, her presence commanding among a coalition of reformers. A senior advisor outlined the Financial Equity Act, a proposed bill to ban discriminatory lending practices nationwide. Your work at Sentinel set a precedent, the advisor said. We want you on the national board, Ms. Harper's shaping policy. Evelyn accepted, her mind on the nurse, the mechanic, her mother people whose lives hung on this bill. The news sent shockwaves through the industry, with other banks scrambling to adopt similar reforms, not out of ethics but survival. Horizon Financial, weakened by its own bias scandal exposed in the fallout's wake-up call, collapsed under regulatory scrutiny, its failure a warning. Change or fall. Evelyn returned to Sentinels, where Thomas Reed greeted her with a rare grin. Stocks. Stabilizing, he said. Clients are trickling back, and Prestige's bookings are up 20%. Your reforms are working. And the leaks? Evelyn asked, her eyes narrowing. Trace Decline's team, Thomas said. They're quiet now, but watch your back. Evelyn nodded, her gaze drifting to a news alert on her phone. Sentinel Holdings leads industry reform. The headline was a start, but she knew the fight wasn't over. She thought of Michael, now leading with confidence. Marcia, building a fund for dreamers. Clara, whose sacrifice had paved her path. Sentinel was changing, and so was the world beyond its walls. As she stood by her office window, Manhattan's lights a testament to her resilience, Evelyn felt the weight of what she built and what she'd yet to do. The system wasn't broken. It was being rebuilt, and she was its architect. The Manhattan skyline stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of Evelyn Harper's office, a tapestry of steel and light under a late summer dusk. At 38, Evelyn stood alone, her tailored navy blazer draped over a chair, her white blouse softened by the day's wear. The office was quiet. The hum of Sentinel Holdings headquarters faded to a whisper, but the weight of her journey lingered like a pulse. 6 months had passed since she'd exposed Edward Langley's discriminatory system, a battle that had shaken the financial world and redefined her legacy. The scars were still fresh stock plunges, lost clients, venomous smears, but so were the victories, reform policies, a national movement, and a new standard for an industry long resistant to change. Evelyn's deep brown eyes, once shadowed by doubt, now held a quiet fire, tempered by the cost of what she'd achieved. She traced a finger over a framed photo on her desk, her mother, smiling at an Atlanta church picnic, her strength a silent anchor through the storm. Beside it lay a handwritten letter, its edges worn from reading. It had arrived that morning, unsigned at first glance, but the signature at the bottom had stopped her heart. Lila Monroe, daughter of Clara Monroe, Evelyn's mentor. Clara, a black banker crushed by the industry in the 1980s for fighting bias, had been Evelyn's guiding star. Lila's words were simple but searing. My mother believed in you. Ms. Harper, you've honored her fight, given her story a voice. Thank you for showing us change is possible. Evelyn's throat tightened, the letter a bridge to the past and a promise to the future. The fight had been brutal. Langley's ouster had sparked a reckoning, with Sentinel stock stabilizing only. After months of reforms, transparent loan approvals, independent audits, retrained staff. Prestige Bank's Atlanta branch, once a symbol of exclusion, was now a model. Led in part by Michael Ortiz, promoted to assistant manager and studying business on a Sentinel scholarship. Marsha Reynolds' equity fund had launched, empowering minority entrepreneurs with microloans, its success a testament to the community's resilience. The Financial Equity Act, born from Evelyn's White House role, was gaining traction in Congress, forcing banks nationwide to confront their biases. Even Horizon Financial, the rival that had shorted Sentinel stock, had collapsed under its own scandal, a cautionary tale for those who clung to the old ways. But victories came with a price. Evelyn had lost Allies board members, like Howard. Klein, who'd backed Langley, now ostracized her. Invitations to elite financial retreats had dried up, the industry's old guard branding her a disruptor, a threat. Social media still buzzed with echoes of the smear campaign, lies about her reckless past lingering like ghosts. She'd stood firm, but the isolation stung, a reminder of Clara's warning. They'll never let you change the system without punishing you. Yet Evelyn wasn't alone. Marsha's rallies, Michael's courage, Thomas Reed's loyalty, and Lila's letter were her armor, proof that her fight had sparked something bigger than herself. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Sentinel Holdings CEO Evelyn Harper to host National Financial Equity Summit. The summit, her next move, would bring together regulators, activists, and executives to cement the industry's shift. It was a bold step, one that would draw new enemies, but Evelyn was ready. She thought of the nurse denied a mortgage, the mechanic delayed on rent, her mother's unfulfilled dream of a bakery lives tethered to a system she was rewriting. This wasn't just about Sentinel. It was about ensuring no one else had to. Fight as she had, Evelyn sat at her desk, a letter from Lila in hand, and let her gaze drift to the skyline. She'd built an empire, only to risk it for justice. The cost had been high trust, alliances, peace, but the reward was a legacy that would outlast her. Sentinel was no longer a machine of profit. It was a beacon of possibility, proof that courage could reshape even the most entrenched systems. She thought of Clara, whose sacrifice had paved her path, and vowed to keep fighting, not just for herself, but for those still waiting for their chance. Evelyn Harper's story is a testament to the power of humanity in the face of injustice. It's not just about a CEO exposing a corrupt system. It's about a woman who saw the pain of others and refused to look away. Evelyn's fight for Marsha, Michael, and countless customers reflects a universal truth. Every person carries a story, and every story deserves dignity. Her empathy, rooted in her Atlanta roots and Clara's mentorship, transformed a corporate battle into a movement for equity, showing that leadership is measured not by profit but by impact. The lessons are profound. First, change demands courage. Evelyn risked her empire to challenge a system designed to exclude, proving that progress begins with defiance. Second, no one fights alone. Marce's rallies, Michael's memos, and Thomas's loyalty remind us that collective action turns sparks into wildfires. Finally, sacrifice is the price of justice. Evelyn lost allies and faced smears, but her legacy endures, a beacon for those who dare to dream bigger. Her story asks us to look at our own systems, workplaces, communities, lives, and question who they serve. Who among us will stand up, as Evelyn did, when the moment calls? If Evelyn's journey moved you, join us at Legacy Stories for more tales of courage and transformation. Subscribe to our channel to catch every inspiring story and share your thoughts in the comments. How will you challenge the status quo? The next fight is just around the corner, and we're in it together.